Well, hello everyone. Welcome back. We're here with Robert from the IEP Group, and he is going to talk to us today about asbestos. There's a lot of concerns out there that we've all heard about or seen on the internet or any number of things. And so we're going to try and help provide a little bit of education as to what asbestos is and what we should think about. So tell us a little bit about yourself, about IEP Group.
My name is Robert Crawley. I'm an industrial hygienist with the Indoor Environmental Professional Group, the IEP Group. And we service Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, Tennessee for asbestos concerns and other indoor air quality related issues. We have certifications in each of those states that can help out with asbestos consulting needs that you might have.
What is an industrial hygienist?
Well, industrial hygiene is the science of the environmental concerns in the workplace. So an industrial hygienist is one who evaluates the risk inside the workplace and determine if there is a concern for the work environment and the health effects from their work situation. And so an industrial hygienist is a scientist who looks at the issues inside the workplace and determines if there is a health risk that could be posed by the environment that they're in.
So what is asbestos and what do people need to know about it?
Asbestos is a natural mineral that is mined from the earth. And so they have historically taken asbestos and put it into building materials of all sorts. So we can find asbestos in everything from plaster materials, flooring materials, popcorn ceiling, if you will, vinyl floor tile, vinyl sheet flooring. It's just naturally occurring, and they put it into the building materials to make it stronger and more long lasting.
So it's kind of that fiber nature of it was what really brought it in because of the strength.
Exactly. So it was used because asbestos fibers are actually stronger than steel fibers. If you take the same diameter of asbestos fiber compared to steel, it's actually a stronger fiber than the steel itself. And not only that, but asbestos can actually be woven. Asbestos was a great product and is used in many building materials because of its properties, thermal insulation, that it's able to regulate the temperatures. It also doesn't break down over chemicals and water and things where you would find these building materials. And so it's a very durable product. It can be woven and it's very long lasting. The things that make asbestos good for a building material, though, unfortunately make it bad for the human environment because when those fibers get breathed into our lungs, just like it won't break down the building material, it will not break down inside of our bodies, and it can cause various diseases, asbestosis, mesothelioma, and lung cancer being the three primary diseases of concern.
So the health risks of asbestos all pertain to breathing it in and airborne. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's the primary concern for asbestos. There are some gastrointestinal cancers that can be caused from ingesting asbestos, but that's generally not a concern. It's typically when the material becomes airborne and you breathe it into your lungs, and then your lungs can't expel those fibers out, and then you end up with a health risk.
So another thing I heard you say, a lot of what you said has been passed, but I know from our conversations beforehand, before we were filming, some of this is still used. They are using some asbestos even today. Is that correct?
That's correct. A lot of people have the misinformation that asbestos is banned in the United States. For better or for worse, it's not. It's not been banned except for in some individual projects. It's banned in fireproofing. It's banned in some of the corrugated paper and some of the block insulation that's been used in the past. But it can still be used and manufactured in the United States. Up until last year in 2020, there was a factory in Louisville that was still putting it in mere mastic. Primary use of asbestos today, from my understanding, is in the gasket industry, that they put it into gaskets in the chemical industry because it doesn't break down. And so you've got these, vats of hydrochloric acid or whatever the compound or chemical of concern may be. And these asbestos still makes a great product for those gaskets, because again, it's not going to break down.
So it's not a problem to touch it. I mean, we can touch it and it's not giving us an issue. I know there's a term they use, I think it's called friable.
That's correct. Asbestos, if it's in your house, if it's in your place of business and it's in good shape, it's intact, there's really no health risk. It's only when you go to renovate or demolish that area, when that building material becomes damaged, it can become in the air. And the word you use is friable. That's the word for it. When a building material is friable, it just means you can crumble it with your hand pressure, and those fibers can get into the air. And when those get into the air, that's when you can actually breathe in the material. But as long as it's in good shape and intact, there is no health risk. And it's still a good building material, and there's no reason to be alarmed if you have asbestos in your home, as long as it's in good shape.
So this is a ceiling tile, a drop-in 2x2 ceiling tile that we bought for a job that we're doing, or did. But would this be considered friable?
So this would be called friable here, because I can crumble it with hand pressure. You can see the dust and the powder. Thankfully, this is not an asbestos-containing product, and so we don't have to worry about that here. If this had asbestos in it, that's something that we could be breathing in now.
Right.
So it's the friability that's concerned.
So I know some of the materials that we deal with, I don't want to say daily, but fairly regular, that have asbestos now. We have some houses, and I think in the 50s was a pretty popular time for them using asbestos. And so we see it in insulation, as we said. We see it in floor tiles, and we can talk about that a little bit more here in a second. But also like insulation on pipe wrap, or even tape that's on HVAC pipe. Those are some of the more common things that we see. Are there any others?
As far as what the EPA says, is that if anything's not bare wood, metal, or glass, essentially, and a few other things like maybe spray foam, then it has a potential to have had asbestos put into it. And unfortunately, there's no way to tell if there's asbestos inside a product just by looking at it and by handling it. The only way that we can tell if it has asbestos is by testing that. So we have to take a piece of that product and we send it into the laboratory. They pulverize it. Sometimes they even burn the product. They may put hydrochloric acid on it and dissolve away the substrate. And the only thing that's left then is the asbestos, if there is indeed asbestos there. And so there's different methods that they have and different microscopes, but they analyze that under a microscope, and they're able to tell us if it has asbestos, what type of asbestos, and how much asbestos is present in that building material.
So at what point do we need to be concerned about asbestos in our house? Because we don't want to scare people. We don't want to put people on edge or on alarm that, oh no, I've got to go and have everything tested. That's not what the goal of this is. This is informative, educational. We just want to make you aware of things.
So again, we go back to if the building material is in good condition, there is no hazard. There's no harm to you or to your family. If you're planning renovations, and particularly the older your house is, it is more likely to contain asbestos. Again, you mentioned, in the 50s and 60s, that era right after World War II, they had all this great asbestos industry going, and well, what are we going to do with this? And so that's when they really started pumping it into the buildings. So if your house is built in the 50s and 60s, it's very likely to contain asbestos. If it's built in the 70s or 80s, it probably has some, but in probably much less concentrations than the older homes. If it's built in the 90s and 2000s, it's possible that it has asbestos, but it's very unlikely at that point. So again, if it's in good condition and you're not going to disturb it, just leave it alone. There's no risk, there's no hazard to you or to your family. If you're hanging one picture on the wall of your child's bedroom, that's not really indicating a risk, to you or to your family. But if you're doing a renovation, if you're going to totally renovate the room, if you're going to scrape that popcorn ceiling because you're tired of that being in your house and you want a new modern look, well, then maybe you need to see about having that tested, find out if it does indeed contain asbestos, and if so, then you would hire the trained professionals and certified asbestos abatement workers that can do that work for you.
So Robert, you brought a couple of samples with you today. I know the one big one that we run into most often is a 9x9 floor tile.
I do have a 9x9 tile here, which you mentioned. And so this one here, the tile itself has 3% asbestos, and the mastic that glues it down has 5% asbestos. However, on occasion, we'll test these, and maybe the mastic is positive, and on occasion, the 9x9 is negative, or vice versa. Sometimes the mastic will be negative, and the tile will have asbestos. And right here, I have an example of a 12x12 tile that was collected right next to the 9x9 tile. You can see the difference here. Obviously, the 9x9 is considerably smaller. In its current condition, it's designed to be walked on and to be cleaned and mopped, and it's intact and very safe in its current condition.
If the asbestos is in good condition, not breaking down, that floor tile, you can walk on it, you can mop it, you can clean it. We're not trying to cast alarm here and make anybody afraid. We're just trying to educate.
So as far as asbestos exposure goes, you may see the ads on TV and, hey, have you been exposed to asbestos? And, call this law firm or whatever. For the most part, people who are experiencing asbestos-related diseases have worked in an asbestos-related industry. So they have worked in a field where they've been exposed to asbestos for long periods of time. So it's typically not going to be, I was exposed to one fiber one day and now I'm going to have asbestos disease. The thing is, Garrett, we can take an air sample and we can set that air sample up outdoors. You live out here in the country, but yet we can set up an air sample outdoors. I can run that thing for a day or two, send that off to the laboratory, and they will eventually find asbestos fibers on those filters that we run out here in the middle of the country. And so we are breathing in asbestos fibers. We are exposed to it, again, because it's a natural part of our environment. If you have questions, you have concerns, and you're not for sure of what this building material is in your house, if you're going to disturb it, then consider having it tested, and or don't disturb the material.
Well, if you were helped today by what we learned, we would appreciate you liking or commenting and sharing what was helpful to you, or even sharing other questions that you may have. Feel free to send those in. We'll have the email listed in the description as always as well. And you can send in questions, send in comments. We would love to have you even share the video and send it to someone that you think may be helped.
All right. Thank you very much for all your time there, Robert, your knowledge, your wisdom. Thanks for watching. Hope this was a help to you, and we see you soon.
Thanks.
See you.